Well, good morning and welcome to the first session of the World Staffing Summit today. Thank you for joining this particular track. We're really excited to have you along with us. This session is entitled Best Practices for Implementing a Deployment Platform. But in fact, it's a whole lot more. It is going to talk about deployment platforms in some detail. And besides just the best practices, we'll be unpacking just what they are, how they work, where they're applicable, some of the challenges and some of the successes that they've all had. So, of course, we'll talk about best practices, but more importantly, we'll educate you all on the importance of this really exciting emerging technology, which Talent Tech Labs actually considers to be one of the most innovative pieces of new technology in the market today that's really additive for staffing companies, especially those staffing companies that are working with hourly workers in their placements. So deployment platforms today are actually a brand new take on old time and attendance systems. And many hourly staffing companies are using systems like a Kronos to track time, log in, log out, and have the candidates get their time approved and things like this. But this generation of deployment tools is actually a digital interface that's being created between the candidate and the client. So both are getting the opportunity to experience an app-like capability to really digitize the way that hourly staffing is being deployed. So we have a great panel today to take you through all of this. And I'm really excited to be joined today by a couple of people who are staffing executives who have experience deploying these systems, and then a couple of the leading technology solution providers who have been bringing these solutions to market. So in a moment, I'll have each of them introduce themselves, but great panel. Keith Corrigan, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Integrity Staffing, has deep experience and a nice little history in deployment platforms. Aram Hamponian, who is working to get back in. He's had a little bit of a technical challenge getting onto the platform this morning, but we're expecting that he'll join us. And he's the CEO of Core Medical. And so he is New Hampshire based and has a healthcare practice that has been leveraging deployment platforms. And then we have Erica Heisen, who is the president of Workin, one of the biggest up-and-comers in the space, and Rohan, who is CEO and founder of Time Saved. So I'll have them introduce themselves and take a couple of minutes to talk about not only the role they're in today, but how they got there, sort of some of their career experiences that informed their views today, either as how they're using the tool or how they decided to build these tools. So why don't we start with you, Keith? If you could say hello and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. As Brian mentioned, I am the COO of Integrity Staffing Solutions. We are a high volume staffer, mainly in the light industrial space. I'm actually in my fourth year with Integrity, and I oversee all of the high volume operations, along with technology, procurement, and our Center of Excellence team that's charged with deploying best practices throughout our organization. As Brian alluded to, we've been going down the path of deployment platform is a new term, right? But we've been going down the path of this for many years, and we've taken, and we'll talk, I think, a little bit later on the build or buy conversations, things like that. But we actually have seen the need for this technology for many years, being in the high volume space. And so we actually built our own. So we'll talk about that throughout the presentation, why we chose to go down that path, and then where we are today. So is that good for now, Brian?
That's a good start. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Maybe just a word or two about what percentage of your business, if you can describe it that way, is deployed through your deployment platform as a component of your total hours billed.
Yeah, right now it's running about 17% of our business runs through the platform in the form mainly of high volume staffing.
Excellent. So we'd love to introduce Aram, and we'll give him that chance when he catches up with us. Hopefully he's in the green room backstage, making his way to the front stage. But let's jump over to Erica. Erica, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and how you got here and what you can enlighten us with about your great background.
Thank you so much, Brian, and the World Staffing Summit for inviting me to share the stage this morning on this topic. My name is Erica Heisen. I'm the president of Workin. We certainly deploy online staffing platforms for the staffing industry since 2015. Prior to joining Workin, I have a particular passion for improving the candidate talent experience as well as improving profitability. I spent 20 years as an operator in front office, recruiting, sales, leadership for a very fast-growing IT staffing firm called Etain Group. In my role of chief operating officer for the last 4 years while I was there, I certainly understand the business cases and the need to impact productivity, profitability, ROI, drive customer value on all fronts for both internal stakeholders as well as external talent and customers, which really has fueled my passion to leverage technology for an industry and help an industry really embrace technology in a new way to service their customers, whether it's clients or talent, and ultimately help their employees and recruiters make more money. So that's a little bit about my personal passion. Here at Workin, we focus 100% on the staffing industry, and really excited to be able to help an industry embrace technology that's actually not that new. It's just that the staffing industry is really kind of waking up to realizing that in this market where talent is very hard to come by, focusing on the talent experience is paramount. And those that are doing that and doing it well are going to be leaders, and those that are going to fall behind are going to be laggards.
Thanks, Erica. Rohan, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. Erica, great to be on a panel with you again, and thanks for having me on here, Brian. Nice to meet you, Keith. A little bit about me. I started off in tech as a builder, and then I ended up working in retail for Canada's largest. So I was actually on the client side prior to getting into here. So I worked for a retail operation in Canada, a subsidiary of Best Buy, managed their largest operation in Canada, the flagship here. And then essentially back in 2015, started a talent platform ourselves. Very quickly found that there was going to be a convergence. We saw this sort of happening and moved into serving staffing agencies in 2016 when we realized that the online platforms, as Erica alluded to, this tech isn't new. It's been around for almost 20 years. You've seen Amazon Turk, Upwork, or before Upwork, Elancer, Odesk, all of those sort of working in the virtual world, the white collar space, and sort of making that work more accessible. And now we're starting to see that shift into on-demand talent for on-site labor in platforms like Uber and Winolo, and you mentioned Blue Crew. What we had seen is that those platforms oftentimes classified workers as independent contractors, as 1099s, and we saw that there would be a convergence into staffing, which is heavily regulated. And so essentially we decided to build the technology for staffing so that they could leverage some of the essentially all of the operational efficiencies that come from having a deployment platform. So we've been doing that for about 7 years now.
That's great, Rohan. And you're situated up in Toronto?
We're in Toronto, yeah. Our team's across Canada and the US.
Cool. Aram, glad to see that you could make it. Glad you could battle your way in. We're just wrapping up the introduction, so why don't you step up? And talk about a little bit about how you built the company and what your relationship is with the deployment platform.
Right, great. I apologize for the technical difficulties here. I love talking about technology and having technical difficulties. But overall, Core Medical Group, we are a national U.S. healthcare staffing organization. We specialize in travel nursing, therapy, locums, and perm placement. I've been with the company for 18 years. And most recently, we just started a partnership with Time Saved over the past 6 months, and really excited to share what we've learned over that period of time and how we think it's already transformed our business in a very quick events, we should say. So really excited to talk about this. Thank you for having me.
That's great. Thank you. So just for our listeners, there's a chat over on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you would have any engaging points you want to raise. We'd love it to be interactive. So if you serve up some questions, we'll either direct them to the speakers in line or address them at the end. But please don't hesitate to use that chat feature. And then for your colleagues, in case you're feeling like they should listen to this as well, you can let them know the session's being recorded, and they can go to the World Staffing Summit's website after this event and listen to any of the sessions that they may not have had the chance to participate in firsthand. So let's jump into this. As you heard in some of these introductions, deployment platforms in one form or fashion are somewhat not new. But this conversation is not about the old school, our granddad's deployment platform, like the Cronoses of this world. This is the next generation, which is really the digital interface that, as Erica touched on in her opening, really has a tremendous appeal in creating great candidate experience and making a sticky experience for the companies that deploy these platforms with their candidates. And by making it really easy to use for the clients, it embeds the staffing company really deeply into that organization and makes you sticky there. So it seems like a really winning proposition. But these are a little bit complicated to install. And so during this conversation, some of the questions we'll talk about, how do we perfect the implementation, and what does it really mean to have both the candidate, the client, and the staffing company on the platform and taking full use of it. Getting back to the notion that it's not entirely new, I would say that this generation of tool started to make an emergence probably with the big splash that TrueBlue implemented back in about the 2019 timeframe. And what they reported was that in just one quarter, they put almost 1 million hours of shift work through the platform that they had built with Swipe Jobs. And so, a couple case points there. One is astronomical number of hours being put through the platform, and a platform that was built by a third party that they were able to white label and make their own. Some of the key features that we'd like to unpack today as we get into the discussion. So why don't I start with you, Rohan? Let's talk about, from a technology perspective, what is a deployment platform? And of course, these are lay people on the call, so we don't need the code level, but if you could talk about what the tech actually does, that'd be really helpful.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, when we started back in 2015, the world of work was already shifting. People were using Uber for taxis, Tinder for dating, Amazon for shopping, and you could do your banking on your phone. But the world of work very much still relied heavily on desktops. Recruiters, if you watch them, had to be behind a desk with multiple monitors. You couldn't, if you were to look at them, you'd kind of see them as day traders, right? Like they have these multiple screens. They had all these different windows open on their screens, and they look very much like bankers. Workers had to come into an agency office and fill out reams of paper for an application, and then clients had to send in these requests well in advance in order to make sure that their staffing needs were met. Today, mobile tech can take care of these needs using real-time data that's available in pretty much everyone's pockets. Most folks look at this type of tech and think, at the surface level, I need an app for my candidates. So knowing that we were going to have a light industrial client on here, Keith, I figured Aram could shed a little bit of light to get a wider experience. But ultimately, it's a different candidate experience. It's pretty much what people all of us are consumers, and where we sort of have come to expect a certain level of service, a certain level of transparency, a certain level of communication. How do we enable that for a staffing agency, whether it's a startup or someone that's 100 million or a few hundred million in revenue? You mentioned it, Brian. TrueBlue was one of the early adopters of this, and they sort of lit the path for us to show what works, what doesn't work. And for builders like us, it's great to be able to kind of see that in practice, so that we can actually look at makes it easier, right? Because they basically forged that path that we can learn from.
Thank you. That's great. So Erica, why don't you explain, if you can, how these operate and what does it enable the staffing firm to do differently?
Yeah, I know we don't have all day. So I think what's important to think about here is, as an operator of a staffing firm, Keith's a COO. I know he's going to talk about this firsthand, but you're always thinking about internal, right? Like, what's the impact to my business going to be which is a great result of what Rohan was just talking about, which is focusing on the talent experience. So really, we help our customers look at the benefits threefold. One is from the talent point of view, which Rohan just touched on. It's, how do we meet the needs of today's talent, which are really consumers, same people on Amazon and Netflix and shopping online and with 2 clicks of a button, right? So mobile is for everyone. And the banking industry did this many years ago. Airlines have, mastered it. And certainly hotels are starting to get into it, right? Where you can bypass your check-in and use your phone as a key card. And these are all things that make it really easy for your customers to do business with you. So the more friction, you can remove from that process with talent, the easier it is going to be for you to differentiate yourselves with talent in the marketplace and have, be able to attract talent, retain talent, re-engage talent. So that's certainly the talent point of view. Brian, specifically, you asked me about the staffing firm. And I think, as a COO, you always want to put your CEO, COO hat on and think about the business impact. So I can speak to that briefly here. And it really is not one size fits all, because each staffing firm that we partner with really has our unique strategy of what they are looking to accomplish, whether it's to really focus on the talent experience, improving the client experience, both, and or improving profitability, which is honestly one of the biggest levers that we see the results in that our companies that we partner with can consistently measure, is improving that productivity per producer, which I know Keith will be prepared to share in a little while. Certainly automation of manual processes. So where are there places where there are things in spreadsheets? Maybe it's scheduling. You talked about Chronos from a timekeeping perspective. Ironically, a lot of our customers don't actually use online staffing tools or timekeeping because of the wall clocks and trying to educate their customers to convert to something. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of manual time clocks out there and wall clocks. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all component there. So certainly profitability, the ability to attract and retain talent, leveraging mobile technology, doing app-based recruiting, improving your NPS scores, driving referrals, increasing referrals is a huge component, number 2. And then lastly, improving revenue, right? So how do you leverage the technology that you have? And Brian, I know you're passionate about this, to take it in front, up the chain to your customers. They're always asking you, what are you doing differently? And how can you leverage your stack and your approach and your strategy to win net new customers? Even if they're not necessarily adopting online staffing and don't want or value customer self-service, you can still deliver amazing differentiation as a staffing firm to your clients to win net new customers, retain clients. And, if you're in a sea of sameness with 25 other vendors, how do you become the number 1 on that vendor's list? How do you improve speed, efficiency, and service to your customers? Because that's what they're depending on you for.
That's great. Thank you for that. Keith, why don't you tell us about Integrity's deployment platform journey? Because as you alluded to in your intro, it's a bit longer and started a little bit homegrown.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. So we entered the high volume staffing space about 25 years ago. And at that period of time, there was nothing out there, right, to create great efficiencies in staffing tens of thousands of people. So we were faced with the very real challenge of either we use the technology that's available to us in a less than ideal way, or we go build our own technology. So Integrity chose that path. We chose to go down the path of building our own. We started with our own ATS system. We built that out. It was very much designed to serve high volume staffing customers, and it did it incredibly well. Later on, what we realized is, more and more candidates were looking for an app-based experience, right? So cell phones emerged. People started downloading apps for everything, right? Now we're at a place where, we would literally say there's an app for everything. And so that digital experience, that online experience was something that candidates wanted. So we started moving down that path of creating our own. We actually created our own technology called FlexForce. And it proved to be very advantageous to us, but also challenging. So now we've got our own ATS system and our own app-based hiring platform, if you will, deployment platform. And we're a staffing company. and you got to make some choices there, right? So how much time, effort, and investment do I put on these platforms to keep evolving them, maintaining them, and so on, versus just evolving the actual staffing business? So fast forward to about 2 years ago, we made the decision, which was tough for us, right, to abandon that side of the business, that software side of the business, if you will, and develop deeper partner relationships with technology partners out there. So a central ATS system, and then hub and spoke concept of marketplace partners that would add on to that ATS system and provide opportunity to improve certain aspects of the candidate experience. The deployment platform being one of them. It's been an interesting journey on the deployment platform side, and I would say to anybody that's going down this path or thinking about it, you got to understand what it is that you, the company, want to do with it, because I think we're talking about kind of the scheduling aspect of it and the customer interface, but there's a lot of ways to use the deployment platform, if I quote unquote that term. I can use it as just an app-based hiring platform. I can use it as a redeployment tool. I can use it as on-demand staffing. And on-demand has its own nuances. Rohan alluded to earlier. Is this just a 1099 relationship where I'm simply providing a person that says I can work at this supplier? Most of our customers have very specific requirements to onboard and orientate and train, things like background checks, drug tests, things of that nature. And you have to be able to understand the needs of your customer and match those up with what candidates offer and what they have, and actually perform that processing. And I think the space that it's evolving into now, what Erica's alluding to, is these platforms now have to be able to cross that bridge, right? They have to be able to serve what the customer needs, or the customer quickly gets frustrated that we're actually providing people that don't meet their needs. And we have taken a lot of time, because we so firmly believe in the candidate experience. We would never want to match a candidate to a customer, have that candidate show up, and really the job isn't a fit for them, or they're not fully qualified in one way or the other for what the customer needs, and now the customer's frustrated with them. We've got to create a great experience. So it's certainly something that you got to think about. But for us, that evolution was really about just making sure that we were working with the best platform available. And we felt that continuing to try to develop our own and invest the time and resources into that wasn't the best use of our time. Staffing agency is, now there's enough technology out there that you can leverage marketplace partners and form those good partnerships to take this in the direction that you want to take it. You just got to figure out, what is that direction? What do I want to do with this?
Thanks, Keith. That's really helpful. Great journey and probably great outcome, recognizing what you want to be when you grow up, right? Focus on what you can do really well. Use partners for what you can't. So Keith, Aram, why don't you take a different take on this? You've heard others refer to the ATS and the deployment platform as separate things. Maybe you could discuss in your use case how your deployment system works with the other pieces of technology in your tech stack. What does it touch? How does it work with them? Is it integrated? Does it stand alone? Tell us how it all works inside your company.
Sure. So happy to. Similar to Keith and his organization, we have a hub and spoke model as well. And we hear a lot from our internal staff that, I have to be in this system or that system. I have to live in 7 different systems all at the same time during the day. So when we started partnering with TimeSaved, although they have a very robust database themselves, we actually didn't want that to be turned on for our staff. And we wanted it to all live in our ATS. And so anything that comes between TimeSaved and our ATS will sit in that ATS. They automatically get updates from everything that a candidate will do within the mobile app. And so we've had good adoption so that people don't feel like we're adding more onto their tech stack and they have to learn something new. They just have to keep doing what they've been doing within our current ATS, and it has really taken off in terms of what we're getting on a per desk growth basis over these last few months. Now, we also have this opportunity in that we have our own database that we use internally here at Core Medical Group, where we have our own functionality, and we really want to connect that in. So we've gotten the ATS and TimeSafe to work really well, that we feel is on a great track. And now we want to add more layers onto it to enhance that candidate experience that Keith was talking about. That's really, I think when we started our journey with TimeSafe, we had like this perfect mobile app in mind, and we were just going to launch it all together in that same day. And we realized it probably will take a little longer than we wanted. And so we've started with the ATS. It's going really well. The next step will be into our current internal database that will feed into the back office from a payroll billing perspective. And then it'll enhance the candidate experience to have our payroll provider connected into it. So we're really excited to have that total solution. Just like our internal staff will say that they have to live in a lot of different databases, so do our external clinical colleagues who might have to sign into this website or that one to complete something. We want that all to live within Core Connect, and we're really excited about that. So thus far, I would say if you're on that journey, you're not sure which way to go, try to limit the amount of systems that your internal staff need to be in, and you should see an increase on a per desk performance basis.
That's great insight. And from that comment, I think our listeners can appreciate that it's going to be different in every company's deployment as to how these systems fit. But maybe Rohan, you could take a shot at suggesting generally, how do recruiters or sourcers' responsibilities change because of the implementation of a deployment platform?
Sure. I think, well, just looking at Harem's, so part of what we do is we always do interviews with every stakeholder. So, who's actually using the system. Oftentimes, when we start engaging with a staffing firm, we're engaging with the COO, the CEO, the CFO. Those are the decision makers. They're the visionaries. They're the ones who want to take their organizations forward. They're not always the same people, or most often they're actually not the people that are actually going to be using it. And so we need to make sure that as we build it, we're building it to solve the real problems that recruiters, candidates, clients are facing. And so we, every week we have an interview section where we go through, and our user experience team is researching by interviewing actual candidates. And it's, candidates, clients, recruiters. And what we hear from recruiters is it changes the conversation, it changes their workflows, it changes the amount of administrative work that they need to do. And over time, they spend less time on that administrative work, like making sure that, if a job is coming from this system, it needs to have this information communicated out versus another system. And they can instead just focus on, the personal growth and development of the person that's right in front of them. And how do we help them build that relationship rather than focusing on, because ultimately, if you talk to folks in the staffing and recruiting industry, the majority of them, the vast majority of them, did not go to school to be a recruiter, to be a staff, like to be in staffing. They got into it because they sort of fell into the fact that they really like talking to people. And how do we, as technologists, like as builders, how do we use that technology to sort of empower that relationship building rather than, and remove as much of that administrative work off of that person's plate?
Thank you. That's great. I think that the way that these systems touch on what we'll call the trifecta, the candidate, the client, and then your own internal staffing company's internal staff, makes it an interesting change management initiative to get underway. So maybe Keith, you can discuss what were some of the biggest challenges on any of those fronts that you might briefly just sort of throw out, and we can unpack them a little more. But what do you think the biggest challenges to overcome getting this kind of a system stood up were or are?
As I talked about earlier, just understanding where you want to use it. What is the way that you want to use it? Rohan actually touched on something really that is probably at the crux of all this is with recruiters, right, is how are they going to use the tool? What does it look like for them? What does it do? How does it change their work? And so defining that becomes important, right? Because it will change. And if we use technology to augment, right, what staff do, and I love what you said, Rohan, is really what we're trying to do is take away some of the more tedious tasks that a recruiter has to do, that repetitive, matching and searching databases and all those sorts of things that they have to do, processing paperwork, getting signatures on documents, all those sorts of things. If we focus on eliminating that work or reducing that work, then they can better focus on the person sitting in front of them, right? Working with them. So some of the hurdles is actually just defining what is it that the technology is going to do, and what is the recruiter going to do. And if we have a good understanding of that, then the two can work nicely together, right? So if you go into it and you don't know what that's going to look like, it can present a lot of challenges. And we crossed some of those hurdles ourselves, right? We had to go back and redefine some of those job responsibilities so that we clearly knew, because the technology is going to take over certain parts, and the recruiter is going to be maybe responsible for things that they weren't responsible for, or that they weren't spending enough time, or the time that they would like to spend with a candidate, spending time getting to know them. So that's certainly a hurdle, is just understanding that definition. And then other things that can present challenges is, depending on your team and your team's abilities from a technology standpoint. Aaron alluded to earlier, ideal state is having these systems integrated with all of your other systems. So if you have a digital onboarding platform where all of your documents are coming through, ideal state is that those documents are being served through this technology. And that requires a high level of integration. Being able to feed jobs back and forth between the ATS and candidate information. So all of it flowing seamlessly, so that there is one interface for your staff, because nobody would want staff jumping around to 5 different systems and trying to figure that out. And that is a hurdle, right? Because there's a lot of information around candidates, and there's a lot of sensitive information that you don't want, just floating around in the ethers, right? So taking the time to work with marketplace partners that you're going to partner, that are going to be a part of your technology stack, if you will, to ensure that they're all working seamlessly together. So understanding what those relationships are and building those integrations is super important. And it all starts with, the biggest thing is a plan, right? If you go into this without a plan, you're going to fail. What's that old saying, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. That's so true of this, right? So technology as a part of any business, but staffing industry in particular, since this is our conversation, you got to go into this with a good firm plan, march to that plan, and then make changes as needed. If you don't, it's a recipe for failure and frustration, for sure.
Thanks, Keith. So in those couple of responses about the changes that are going to be affected with these kind of solutions, both of those answers so far sort of looked a little bit inside the staffing company, recruiters and software they have to use and so forth. But you've also got behaviors of candidates and the guy on the shop floor that's filling a shift. And so those are relationships that are owned by the staffing company. But maybe Erica, you could take a shot at, what is it up to the staffing company to get those change management things solved, or do you, as a provider of these interfaces, add anything to that conversation that assists in the change management with the candidates as well as with the people that are filling, that are ordering up the workers?
Yeah, I would love, it's funny, I would actually love to hear Keith and Aaron's perspective on this, because, at the end of the day, I think, for us, we are thinking every day, what can we do to improve the talent experience? And for talent, they're already trained to want to do things super easily on their mobile device, right? And so the the lift for talent is pretty simple. You don't need a complex training manual to figure out what buttons to push in the apps to engage with your firm if we're doing our jobs well, right? So for talents to be able to understand from the staffing firm why you're investing in this technology, what it's going to do for them. Again, every staffing firm has their unique strategy. Maybe there is onboarding as part of it or timekeeping. So, catering your messaging to that talent audience and what you believe you can give them in the app. And also having a strategy around, do I want it to be all self-service? How much do I want to make self-service? We talked about TrueBlue earlier. Much of what their strategy is full-on self-service. There are many staffing firms who believe that the secret to success is having a combination of servicing talent when and how they want to be serviced, right? So I would say, Brian, to really answer your question, it really does depend on your strategy of how you want talent to engage with you, or if it's simply, we want to make sure that you can connect with us anytime. It's this idea of having this like digital recruiting clone that's on all night. Talent might not be exploring jobs until after hours. They may not be looking for activities with you and your firm during your office hours. And the best analogy I can provide for those of you that are joining us to learn about online staffing is really the banking industry. Used to have a branch on every corner. I lived in Charlotte for 25 years. I could walk into a Bank of America and they were everywhere. And over time, slowly but surely, there are still branches out there and you can still go into them. But, how many things do you want to do in a branch as a consumer? And certainly COVID has accelerated this. But, if you want to go into a branch, great. And you can have your high touch service there perhaps, or maybe even in the branch is fully automated. But I think it's a lot about meeting your talent where with your strategy, right? And it's very terrifying to a lot of folks that are probably on this call to think about what has been historically defined white glove service, high touch. I want to see you in person. I want to talk to you. I want to bring you into my branch or office, to thinking about the world in a different way, saying, oh my gosh, actually talent may not value having to come into my office. It requires a change of thinking. So I think that's just, for the folks that are listening here, it really does depend on, how you want to service your talent, but hopefully the easiest lift you have is getting talent to use the app. And the bigger lift is really helping your recruiters understand why this is going to help them, why their data might be more important. So if they're putting fields into their ATS and they never cared about pay rates before, all of a sudden they might care about populating the data in the ATS. I just wanted to comment on what Aram and Rohan and Keith have all said. A big key to the success here is letting your recruiter have minimal change, right? Having them continue to work in the systems they're used to, making it easy for them to work out of their ATS as kind of the core system of record, and give them that lift so that talent can, by serving the talent in a new way, it reduces the inbound calls about little things. And it's not just recruiters. I think Aram is talking about this too, where, if you put pay and hours in the app and access to looking at your pay statements, how many inbound calls are you reducing to your back office team? We've seen clients have significant lift. They had no idea. It was actually not a goal that they'd set out to do. It was kind of a happy accident. It's like, oh, wow, we can focus on other things and not just reacting to questions from talent.
Thank you. That's great. So Aram, as a staffing executive, the light bulb goes off like, wow, this makes perfect sense. I'm going to create a better candidate experience, going to get them really wed to my brand, going to make my recruiters more efficient. Then you got a customer. And maybe that customer is just used to picking up the phone and calling you for getting a shift filled. What did you do, or have you done on the client side to have them see the value of this kind of an offering? And was that a heavy lift, or did they get it and just like jump on?
Yeah, I wish I could say that we're at that point on our deployment. We have not gotten on the client side, given the state of healthcare in our country right now. We thought that if we're going to make an impact to COVID and the problems, we wanted to first focus on the candidate side and try to get as many qualified clinicians as possible into our clients' hands. And our clients right now, I don't think are loving changing how they're operating and doing business, as they're putting out fires each and every day. So we didn't want to add more stress to them. We wanted to alleviate their problems by trying to give them the most talent as possible. When we go down this path, I would say we're going to take a similar approach, just like we have here internally. We want all stakeholders to be involved in the process. We're not just going to go, talk to the C-suite. Obviously, we'll talk to the C-suite at the beginning, but we want to make sure everyone on that tree, is on board with that and make sure that it is the right decision for them and not just getting the buy-in from the top, dogs. We need everyone to make that change. And so for us, when we do go down that path, it's going to probably be a slower burn than we had on the uptake, as Erica already pointed out. Talent, you flip that on, they're pretty quick to figure it out. I think it'll be a much heavier lift on the client side, but we know that can add value to them. We just don't think right now it's the best time to be talking to them about those changes, only because of what's happening in healthcare today.
Right. So your issue is somewhat sector specific. Maybe Keith can add a little bit of light to what it was like on the client side. And maybe your clients knew about this capability because you had your own play in the market beforehand. But what was it like to get them to embrace this as the way to do business?
I would say that's an ongoing challenge, truthfully. It's education with a customer. I mean, some customers are used to things like VMS systems, right? So they're used to putting orders in a system. Others are not. And so it really depends on where they're at and what they've been doing. And so at that point, we have to educate them that they can get involved in this process. The on-demand side of the platform is probably the easiest way to explain that. I've got a shift that opens up in the middle of the night. Somebody called out for the morning shift, and I have the ability, instead of waiting for my staffing company to come in the office in the morning, calling them up, placing an order, I have the ability to go into the system and make those shifts available to my workforce, right? And have somebody claim those shifts. Those are very specific use cases, but they're ways that a customer can understand how it benefits them, and then they're more likely to use that, right? There's that with them in it for them. Like I can fill those shifts where before, highly likely those shifts would have went unfilled, or certainly later in the day before the staffing company could react. Now I can interface with the candidates, and they're a qualified pool. So I know that they're going to show up. They're the folks that are vetted to whatever I needed them to be vetted for, because the technology is helping me with all of that. So I really think it depends. And I will say customers are all over the spectrum on this. Some haven't even started down that path. They don't want to do it. They just want to call somebody up. They're still in that mode, all the way to the ones that really do just want to be able to pop an order in online, set it and forget it, and let it get filled. And so they're somewhere in that spectrum. But understanding your customers, speaking with them, educating them is a big deal.
That's great. Thank you.
Brian, I'd love to add one more thing, since we have a curious audience here. But I just want to caution the staffing firms that are on the phone here or joining us. If you don't think your clients are exploring this right now, you're missing out, right? So I think Keith hit the nail on the head. It's worth a conversation because in RFPs, we're seeing customers coming to us saying, help us respond, right? What we more and more clients are looking for this type of technology, and the opportunity there. And I believe part of the future is, traditional ways to engage talent, 40-hour worker. I want Sally to be there every day, and I want the same worker every day for 40 hours. Part of the opportunity for staffing firms is to help clients have access to larger pools of talent. And maybe that client would be interested in having Sally in the morning and Keith in the afternoon. So these platforms can be a great vehicle for them to be able to access talent, cast a broader net, and not just sit there on open requirements that are putting a lot of pressure on your firms to fill. So really having that dialogue with your customers and their openness to be serviced in new ways. I would encourage you guys with urgency to be having those discussions, because if you're not, someone else will be.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. We've certainly seen a growth in folks looking at direct sourcing platforms, and whether it's in healthcare or in the light industrial space, essentially a lot of companies looking at how do they, everyone's got this war for talent. That's why, you've seen this growth here. And that experience is paramount for staffing agencies, but we're seeing a lot of end clients also trying to adopt solutions like this, right? And so for staffing agencies that aren't looking at this, hospitals are reaching out and asking for direct sourcing solutions. Massive warehouses are looking to do that as well. And part of the reason that they want to do that is they want to reduce their reliance on staffing agencies, because there is a perception that staffing is expensive and that it's behind when it comes to technology adoption. So if there's the opportunity for that end client to leapfrog and do it themselves, they certainly will. But if that staffing agency can truly continue to be that partner and get ahead and help the company, it's just like Keith said. He realized, like, kudos to you, Keith. I mean, a little bit late for your haircut. You're pretty much like me, but kudos to you for realizing that, hey, going down this path is going to mean that we have to split our focus, and we have to be a tech company and a staffing company. And we realize that we want to be a staffing company first and foremost. I think for a lot of those end clients, given the option of having a staffing partner that can truly provide them the labor that they need, when they need it, where they need it, at the right time, the right cost, that they're not going to go down that direct sourcing, or perhaps they'll push that decisioning off, that planning off. But if we continue as the staffing industry to try doing things the way that we always have, because it's always worked that way, then that's going to force that change for the end client.
Rohan, you bring up a great.
Brian, if I could just add one thing in there real quick. So we got to realize that deployment platform, this whole technology group that we're talking about, doesn't magically put candidates into the candidate funnel, right? So for an end user, for a client, it's now I'm taking on the technology side, and I've got to adopt and implement technology, but I still have to fill the funnel. I still have to process. I still have to do these things, right? So it's a question of, is that who I am? Similar to the decision we had to make, technology staffing, is, am I a manufacturer? Am I a distributor? Or am I a staffing company? And how much time? So it's really, it's that same old conversation of, how much of this do I want in-house, and how flexible can I be with it? Do I have a great partner in this space? So it's still opportunity for the staffing companies, right? That's not gonna go away. Right? It's really not. You can have all the platforms you want to match talent and opportunity. There's still a lot of work to be done in the middle and in the locating or sourcing of those candidates.
So Keith, that's a great point, and it fit very nicely after what Rohan had opened up, which is the competitive threat that the industry is facing right now from either temp labor marketplaces, which are a little bit slow at catching up because of some unique features of them, but the ease of use has established new expectations on how easy it should be to dial up a contractor. But more of a threat, we believe at Talent Tech Labs, are these direct sourcing platforms, which give the client the notion that they can just reuse the talent that they already know. And so it's always been our belief that a tech-only solution there is not going to do very well, because there's a service component that's needed to make that work. And what you're referring to, Keith, is that agencies do have a natural advantage of knowing the candidates, knowing how to source, and getting them onto these platforms, that then they can start to behave almost like as Rohan was talking to, the direct sourcing strategy or direct sourcing solution. There's actually talks later in today's tracks that address both of these areas. And so we're trying to shed light on the competitive threat that's going to come from direct sourcing, because clients are starting to say, hey, do I need to be paying these markups? It just seems to be a clunky process. Agencies, by adopting this digital interface that deployment platforms afford them, actually are in a great position to have that client never want to think about a direct sourcing strategy, because you've in effect brought them to that digital solution already. So great for suggesting that, Rohan. We happen to think that this is the most enabling piece of technology in the market lately to allow staffing companies to really play as digital players and get a break from the old bricks and mortar perception that some of these competing technologies like e-staffing and template marketplaces are suggesting that they can enjoy a totally digital experience. So hats off to you developers who are building these platforms, because I think they're very timely for the market. So let's, in the few minutes that we have left, I'd love to just go around and share back with our audience, because our title was Best Practices. So if we could just go around, and I'll start with Aram. One thing that you would like to share with the audience is something lesson that you learned that you'd consider to be a best practice and you'd want to pass on to others. And we'll just go around and have each of you share from your own perspective what a best practice might be. Aram?
Yeah, I guess it'd be a little bit of repetition of what I said last time, but this is a massive change to your organization, and it's going to touch everyone in it. So you have to have total buy-in, not just from your executive team, but your senior leaders, your mid-level leaders, and your staff. So having cheerleaders throughout that process is going to really make or break it. And I feel like we did a good job. We could have probably done better as we were going through our process, but we have cheerleaders now, all the way up and down the organization who are really excited about what we're doing. And that just enables more followers there. And we've seen an uptake on usage because of those cheerleaders, whether it's in the back office, like Erica was saying, and less calls coming in or less emails coming in to sales, and more people saying, wow, that person's doing really well over there. What are they doing? And when they say, I'm taking the technology and leveraging it more, that just gets more people, buying in. So I would say just whatever it took you to make that decision on your ATS and get the buy-in, because that's the total transformation. This is the same thing. So understand it's not just maybe adding technology on. It's a lot bigger than that. That's what I would say is what we did. Thank you.
Thanks, Aram. Erica, why don't you take a shot at that?
I just agree 100% with what Aram said. That's one of the most important things. And I just kudos to Keith and the entire Integrity executive team for being chief cheerleaders. Todd Babel is exceptional at this. And I think it's really probably the most important thing. So just giving it another seal of approval to Aram's advice there. I think having a great plan, Keith talked about this earlier, is really important. But also just being willing to just not feel like your plan has to be perfect, and that you can have a place to start and you don't have to chunk it all off at one time, right? You can basically say, I want to start here. Let me focus on the talent experience, and, and then let's build a roadmap together on where we want to go from here. And then being able to review that plan with some key metrics and, look at those insights, leverage the data to say, well, what could we be doing differently, or what could we do a tweak on our plan? What's changed, right? This is a very fast moving industry. Customers' expectations are moving very quickly. And so just being really willing to tweak your plan as you go and be flexible.
Thank you. Keith, lessons learned, best practice you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about the top-down approach, and I think that for evolution in an industry, it takes visionary, right? So it does take a top-down, but when it comes time to implement, it should be cross-functional, for lack of a better term. If you include recruiters, if you include people that have to work with these systems in the implementation, and you take into their operating reality, like what really is going on in their world and how is this going to impact them, and you account for that throughout the implementation, you get the buy-in of your team. They understand how this is going to fit in and impact them, and they get excited about it. Probably the biggest thing I could say is, don't try to do an implementation where you've just literally, you're bought in at the top, but that's all. The implementation itself involve multiple people. Let people weigh in on it, pick decision and move. To Erica's point, you need to have a plan, but you also got to be flexible with that plan, because your thought will evolve as you learn more and more about the platform. But probably just that biggest thing. I've got a whole list of things, thinking about like what would be the best practices. But for us and what we learned, we had a very good team, and we still do, in place to implement this technology. And it takes a lot of different minds thinking and getting involved so that we get maximum buy-in and maximum effectiveness while improving the customer and candidate experience. Such a big deal.
Thanks, Keith. Rohan, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, and I'd like to echo what Erica and Keith said. It's great to have a plan. Not planning is definitely planning to fail. But that Tyson quote, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, and you're certainly going to get punched in the face many times as you go through this. And so but it's worth the lift, right? I think what you're hearing from Keith, what you're hearing from Aram is that yes, it's transformational. Yes, it's a lot of work, but you can take it off in chunks, and you can do it in little pieces, and then it's totally worth it. And so you can tell, we got into the best practices. 5 minutes, 6 minutes left in the conversation. That's just from we're talking to folks that have been through and have a lot of these war stories to share. So that's why it took us this long. I think when we're looking at like Aram's team, for example, what I liked about their approach is they had 17 different people in the room representing their 150 internal staff all the way through that decisioning process of, picking the partner and then looking at how they wanted to roll it out, what this meant. Like they had a PowerPoint presentation that went out to the entire team, and then celebrating the folks who had 50% productivity increase as a result, and showing the commission wins to the others, because that's recruiters ultimately are hopefully driven by that. And so I think sharing the wins, having a plan, all of that is imperative. But ultimately, it's just get started, and then you'll be able to figure it out. It's not as new anymore.
Thanks, Rohan. Listen, panelists, you guys have been great. You've shed so much light on this area. It's an exciting space. Thank you very much for your preparation, for your sharing today, for your candor. I hope our listeners got a tremendous amount of value out of this. Please feel free to connect with any of us after this call to explore more deeply. We'd love to share. Panelists, thank you, each and every one of you, for the great work today. Really nice working with you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care,
Thanks
everyone.
for having us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.